Welcome back. I am Dr. Hadley. This is my series on Microsoft 365 Excel. This unit we are looking at functions, and today we're going to be looking at some specific functions of subtotal and aggregate because, and Percentof too, because they kind of build off of the last lesson. So from last lesson, we were doing things like count A, product. So let's get a list going because that's what we're going to need. So maybe we have sales, in the west, east, north, south. And maybe that is, the U.S. US total, and then maybe west, east, north, south, Europe, or something, total. Okay. And then we have like a grand total. Okay. So let's just throw some numbers in here. So 112, 356, 751, 200. Okay. And then we're going to calculate the total, but I'll show you how to do that in a sec. 617, 589, 989, and 600. Okay. So the first one I want to look at is subtotal. Okay. So equals subtotal. And what you see as soon as I do before I do the parentheses, it says returns the subtotal in a list or database. Okay. So the first thing it's looking for is which subtotal do I want? Do I want an average? Do I want count, max, min? Whatever I want. It does not have to be a sum. There are many choices it can be. But we went over all of these in a previous lesson, so I'm not going to. We're just going to grab some really quick, which is 9. Okay. So we got 9, comma, and then, the list of numbers, so the array that I'm doing the subtotal off of, and that's going to be that guy. And we're going to copy and paste that for the other one, so copy, paste. If I wanted to do a grand total, yes, I could do, equals this cell plus that cell. Okay. But another useful function is something called aggregate. So equals aggregate. And it works very similarly. Okay, it has, all these functions, percentiles, quartiles, all those things. So I'm going to do sum again, comma. But basically what this is going to allow us to do is going to allow us to total everything by ignoring certain things. So I can ignore any nested subtotals and other aggregate functions. So, I want those US totals and Europe totals because I want to know, like, hey, okay, how is each region doing in general, or each country, or each continent, whatever. But I still want, like, okay, how much sales am I getting globally? Okay, so if I click 0, so it's going to ignore those subtotal cells. So comma, and then of course the range as normal. Enter. You can see 1419 plus 2795, that should be 4214. Yes, okay. Now you might have saw a K as the last thing. So that is for functions that have a secondary argument, like, where is it? Large. So if I want the second largest out of the whole list, but ignore those subtotals because those subtotals are obviously going to be larger. So large, okay. But I want the second highest, 751. So looking at these four numbers and these four numbers, altogether the second highest is 751. Okay, So that's pretty nice. Let's change that back to just a normal sum. 9. And let's look at this 0 again and look at some of the other options. So ignore hidden rows, nested so add hidden rows to that. So if I'm hiding the rows, maybe it's like a subcalculation or who knows what it is, but there's a reason why the cell is hidden. Is going to ignore those. Ignore any error values. Okay. Ignore hidden values and error values. Ignore nothing. Ignore just hidden rows. Ignore just errors. And then ignore hidden and errors. Okay, so any combination basically of those 4 things I can ignore. Okay, so if I do 3, that's gonna ignore as much as possible. So let's do the 3. Rather, let's do the 2. So it's gonna ignore error values, but it's not gonna ignore hidden values. So if I have an error here, so maybe I'm dividing by 0, or I have a reference error or something, let's just do equals 2 divided by 0, because that will give me an error, a division error. Okay. Now obviously that messes up my subtotal, okay, but it does not mess up my aggregate, because it's going to ignore all my subtotals, but it's also going to ignore all of my errors. And the same thing if I hid a cell, and you might be like, well, how do you hide a cell? I think we've covered this, but in case we haven't, so you can't really hide a cell. It's more like you hide a row or a column. You kind of can through filtering, but that's more of an advanced function that we'll talk about later. But if I click on this row, right click it, I can hide row 5. And so coming back to here, right now I am ignoring error values, but I'm including hidden values. Okay, that's why this total didn't change. However, if I ignore hidden ones, so if I make this a 1, it's not going to have that. You can see that the total went down because it's not including that value from column 5. And if I ever need to bring it back, I can just expand it, and you can see as soon as I expanded it and unhid it, as it were, the total comes back to 4214. So the last thing I want to do is %of, which is actually a pretty cool function. I'm not sure how to best do it with this list, so we're just going to try it. Equals %of, okay, returns percentage of a subset of a given data set. Okay, so I have a subset of data, so maybe US, okay, comma, and then the full data set. Okay, so, but let's just include all of the numbers because it's not easy to break up in this context. And there you go. This is 11% of the absolute total of everything, which is pretty nice. That's a neat way to do that calculation. Obviously, it doesn't work well with this data set, but I'm sure there's plenty of data sets where you would want to know, like, okay, up to maybe like if these were dated sales, okay, of the total sales, what percentage is January? So everything that has a January date, that's included in that first one, and then of course the year sales in that second range. It's going to tell you, okay, what percentage is the subset of January with respect to the absolute total. I think that's pretty neat. Well, that is all I have today. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying this series. Keep watching, subscribe, like, and I will see you next time. Have a good day.